My wife and son blame me for my oldest son's death. 10 years ago, my oldest son started a job working the graveyard shift. He was 20 years old. He was having trouble staying awake on his drive home from work in the mornings, so he came to stay with me because I lived closer to his job. He had 2 weeks before he moved into his new apartment real close to his job. After about 4 days if I'm staying with me, forgot about him having trouble staying awake on his drive home in the morning. I had gotten an all-inclusive tickets to a baseball game, and I was taking my youngest son and all his friends. When I came home from work that day, I was excited about the game, and I wasn't thinking. I woke up my oldest son out and asked him if he wanted to go to the game. He looked at me crazy, and then got up to go to the restroom without saying anything. His mother walked in at that time and saw him, and said, "Boy, what are you doing up?" My son replied, "Some fool woke me up." We went to the game, and that next morning when I was at work at 8:17 a.m. my son had fallen asleep and went head-on into an 18-wheeler and killed. My wife and youngest son knew about me waking him up, and they held it against me. Within 2 years, my son had moved off for college, and my wife had divorced me. For 10 years, I've been living with this debilitating guilt and self-loathing. It has ruined my life. I'm on medications for severe depression and PTSD. I lost my business, my house, my wife, both my sons, my health, and my dog. I sit here 10 years later still suffering from that eventful day. Every day I hear the words, "Some fool woke me up." Every day I see his burned up body and images in my head. I recently wrote this article for another sub and got a lot of good advice. I haven't seen or talked to my wife and son, but a handful of times in the past 10 years. I'm thinking about confronting them even now that I'm divorced, and my son is married with a kid that I've never met. I need some type of closure so I can finally heal. How do I confront them and try to get them back in my life? Or should I just let sleeping dogs lie? I really miss younger son and want to be a part of my granddaughter's life. Relevant comments from Ob. Yes, I spent several years in counseling and saw a psychiatrist. It helped some, but the depression always came back. I have learned to live with it, but I want my son back in my life. I'm not sure how to do it. I have messaged him dozens of times in past years. When I found out about medical school, when I found out he got married, when I found out he bought a house, had a child, and on and on. He never answers me back. Update 1. In my original post, I mentioned that my son has barely spoken to me in 10 years. Reading the overwhelmingly positive comments from Reddit, I decided I was going to pursue mending those fences. One comment suggested that I write a letter, and that's what I did. This is basically what I wrote. Dear kiddo, I cannot begin to tell you how incredibly proud I am of you for the man you have become. A father could not ask for more in a son. Considering that we have been through something that no one should ever have to go through, I am so happy that you have pushed through and are living your best life. I'm writing you to let you know that I have also pushed through, forgiven myself, and I'm going to start living my best life also. Enough pain has been caused by something I could not control. It kills me that I have missed so many important milestones and events in your life. I don't want to miss anymore. I am very happy that you are coming to your Aunt Carol's for Christmas. I hope that we get a chance to talk and to hopefully resolve some of the issues that have kept us apart. I miss you more than anything in this world. I miss taking off early from work and meeting you on the basketball court, the volleyball court, the football field, and the soccer field, just us and the boys. You have always been the cause of the happiest days of my life. I pray that we can fix this. I can't wait to meet your wife, your stepson, and my granddaughter, and I can't wait to finally see you again. Love, Dad. Well, Reddit, I hope that it opens an avenue into reconciliation. It's a start. The only possibly bad thing, I also just heard my ex might also be coming. Comment from Up. I sent the letter already. He should have it by now. I wouldn't and haven't tried any type of manipulation on him. I love him too much for that. I pray he is ready to talk in 2 weeks. Update 2. I haven't seen my son or my ex-wife for years. Since the last time I saw my son, he has gotten the girl, got married, bought a house, and had a baby. They have blamed me for my son's death for the past 10 years, the party at my sister's house for Christmas was the first chance I've had to see him or her. To say I was nervous is an understatement. I could barely think straight. I arrived early at my sister's with my mom and aunt in tow. We helped prepare the food and arrange the gifts. My wife showed up a little early as well. She walked into the house and hugged everybody and then looked over at me and nodded. I nodded back. My son was running late because they were driving 5 hours. I went outside and sat on the porch, and that's when my son pulled up. My wife quickly walked out the door past me and walked out to his car. My son got out with his wife and daughter and hugged her, and she helped him unload presents. I wasn't sure if I should walk up to him, so I just stayed on the porch and waited for him to come in. He came walking up to the porch holding his daughter, 1.5 years old. He looked up at me and said, "Dad," and then walked on by and inside. He sat on the right side of the room with his family, and I went and sat on the far left all the way across the room from him. I couldn't take my eyes off his daughter. She was beautiful and full of life, and my first grandchild. The party got going full speed, and there was a full house packed with family. Everyone was talking and exchanging gifts and laughing and eating, and it was a lot of fun. I stayed in my seat over on the far side of the room so I wouldn't crowd him or make him feel uncomfortable. Then my ex-wife from over by his side said to me, "Do you still have your hair?" I just smiled and lifted my baseball cap to show her that I wasn't yet bald like the rest of the family. It was the first sign of life I had gotten. A couple hours into it, and I could see that my son was staring at me. I figured he was mad at me for being there. Then he stood up, and he walked over to me and stood there. So I stood up, and we were almost face to face, and I was waiting for him to say what he had to say, and then I was going to leave. Instead, he reached out and grabbed me and gave me the biggest hug I've ever had in my life. Then he pushed over his cousins that were sitting next to me and made a spot for him to sit. And then we started talking and talking and talking. For the next 2 hours, he caught me up on everything going on in his life. He said he missed me and that he was sorry that he hadn't been returning my calls. He told me that whenever he talked to me, it reminded him of his brother and the way he died. It opened up the depression he had been fighting and felt like he was taken back to that day. He said it wasn't my fault, but it was something that he had to deal with. In the middle of our conversation, I looked around, and there was not a dry eye in the room. Everyone knew what we had been through and what had happened to our relationship. I can't explain the feelings that was going through me and the emotions that were threatening to overwhelm me. It was the best Christmas gift I could have ever asked for. He went and got his daughter and came and sat her on my lap. He formally introduced me and said she needs her granddaddy in her life. So I got to hold my granddaughter for the first time. Then his wife came up and he introduced her, and we hugged and stared each other in the eyes for a minute. I told her I had heard a lot about her and that I was glad that she was with my son. A little while later, my ex-wife came up to me and put her arm around me and told me that I looked good. Then she went back to being ice cold and walked back over to her chair and never said another word to me. I also didn't try to speak to her. I can't begin to tell you all the joy I feel about having my son back. I'm planning to go visit in the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to visit as often as this life allows and going to be a part of my granddaughter's life no matter what. This has really changed my life and removed some of that guilt and bitterness that I've been living with for the past 10 years. I think things are going to be okay, and that's all that matters. I want to thank you all for your comments and advice and support. You guys really made a difference. When I first wrote my post, I wasn't sure what to expect. I felt like you were going to roast me and that I deserved it. I got nothing but encouragement instead and good advice, and just a little bit bashed. I'm so glad I wrote that article. And for the guy that suggested I write a letter, I think that was what made the difference, because he mentioned it and said he's been thinking about it for the past 2 weeks. So all in all, thank you, and I hope I can give some support in y'all's lives in the future. Comment from Up. I was expecting the worst, so what I got was a blessing.